Conversation. Let's kickstart from across our borders. You know, the Middle East is now in full-scale regional war after US and Israel, strikes killed Iran's supreme leader. Now, from where you sit, Mr. Moredi,
yes.
How dangerous is this movement for global stability?
Well, in my view, this is going to affect, the whole, the world in a very big way, because you see, when you heard about the Suez Canal being closed or being a target of the friends of Iran, especially the guys from Yemeni, that's where you find people like Houthis and I think others called as Allah. Such terrorist groups, when they say they're going to make it difficult to get through the Suez Canal, knowing that it was created so that it can shorten the distance of going around the Cape of the Southern Cape, Cape, South African Cape. You call it what do you call it, Cape? Cape Town. Going around Cape Town to come to Kenya or any other country, you see now you have to cross, you have to go around, get around the Atlantic Ocean and come all the way into the Indian Ocean, so that you can be able to get to the shores of whatever country that touches the sea. Now, the Suez Canal was to shorten the distance. So coming from a place like North America or South America, and you want to come to a place like East Africa or go to China, Dubai or such areas, India, they had to cut through the Suez Canal. So the Suez Canal, you can imagine, is an integral economic channel. Okay, so if it's blocked, then it means there's no business, no movement of ships. You've had there's also the lockdown on most airports. Airlines, that is in airports, especially airlines. So there are no flights anywhere. So you see, economically, it's going to injure several countries. Kenya depends on the Chinese market and the Dubai market. So in terms of business, we might for a while have no new stocks in the shops where we depend on obtaining stocks and such items from maybe places like the Kirinyaga roads and spare parts and all these things. Will be a bit difficult to acquire such. When it comes to transporting our agricultural produce, then that will be a bit tricky, because you can't get them from your country to the West. The diplomatic relations right now, I would say some of them are now kind of confused. Kenya is a friend to both warring factions. Is a friend to Iran, and at the same time is a friend to Israel and a friend to the US. We had very good and cordial diplomatic relations for a while. So I think I must say that yes, what's happening in the Middle East is going to affect many. Secondly, I would also say that it's also ushering in something that has a spiritual connotation, because in those last days in Matthew 24, it's about wars and rumors of war, and you see this particular war in the Middle East will have to take a very strong force to put these people down to a negotiating table and end the war, because the fears of the friends of Iran joining, like Russia and China, and the Islamist terrorist groups that would actually escalate the war and take it to a level which even the United States didn't anticipate. The entry of some European NATO countries which are friendly to the United States, when they come in, and also not so significantly African nations militarily, but if Europe joins in, and then the terrorists on the other side join in to support Iraq, China does so, because already, it's not necessarily, America is not really in this war because of its friendship with Israel, but it is there. But you can see what the damage they caused to China in Venezuela, because that's where China was getting most of its oil, and Iran now again curtailing their source of oil then it means the war might become one of the longest wars. Not necessarily Third World War, but it might be a very long, devastating war.
All right. Now, Mr. Daniel Odhiambo, whatever is happening in the Middle East is actually affecting Africa in one way or the other. Now, from where you sit, one would ask the question, how dangerous is this moment for global stability?
Thank you so much, Martin.
Yeah.
That's a very good question, because when we are looking at what is happening at the Middle East now, it is something which of course is shocking, and just as my colleague Macharia has actually indicated, it's very much important such that we bring, or such that a peace can be brought. Because what is important here is that when this particular war escalates, when it continues, because it just started the other day, but we can actually see its effects worldwide. So the moment it continues the way it continues, without having to see actually how it can maybe be stopped, we'll actually have a lot of problems in Africa, because Africa depends on a lot of imports from these particular European countries and all over. And just as we actually know, when the airports have been closed, the movement actually becomes a problem. And therefore, this is likely to cause a lot of economic problems, especially when it comes to maybe the petroleum products and all these. And once the petroleum products, as we are very sure, when the prices goes up, you realize that almost everything, the price of almost everything will actually have to shoot. And therefore, economically, it actually have a devastating effect on in Africa as a whole.
All right, and still on the economic front, Mr. Moidi, Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, a route that carries oil from, it carries actually about 20% of world's oil. Now, one would then ask the question, where are we heading towards? Are we heading towards a global energy crisis?
Unfortunately so, especially for countries that depend on oil. They're going to get so hit, and we'll feel the pain, the pangs of the war, if really it goes beyond the time we are predicting, that maybe it's going to be a few weeks or a month or so. It might go very far, and if it does, even right now you can see the kind of economic adverse effect that is actually having on various economies. And like I tried to allude to, the transportation which is being hampered, both air and sea, it tells you that there's a lot that is put on hold at the moment. The social disquiet is still continuing to grow, both in the countries that are warring and the countries that are affected. And you saw the bombings of the friendly nations to the United States, which are Arab also. If they choose to use the Arab factor in retaliation, they might forgive the Iranians and choose to fight the Arab war and have a common enemy, Israel. So it means there are so many dynamics that would push this war going very far, and that would actually impact negatively on oil. Remember, our tea market, one of the greatest tea markets is actually in the Arabian Peninsula. Talk of Saudi Arabia, talk of Iran, talk of Dubai, Qatar, and the surrounding. These are people who depend on Kenyan coffee and tea. So definitely, when it comes to agricultural produce going to waste, because if Kenya had not prepared a way of maintaining, or not maintaining, but a storage system that is ideal for such circumstances, then that would be devastating to the farmers. If you come to the business community, they ply the route on a daily basis. You have business people from Kenya to Dubai, Kenya to Saudi, Kenya to wherever, Kenya to China, Kenya to the US, because we have the AGOA market which is open for us. So that tells you that we have, and you see it's both ways, export and import. So if the airport itself is dysfunctional, if the seaport is dysfunctional, it means we can only depend on the intra-commercial practice. That's the only thing we can adapt. But while we prepared for that, because if you talk to a coffee farmer knows that my produce is supposed to go for export, because hawking that coffee had actually been entrenched in the laws of this country, that it's hawking, you know, simply so that all this coffee can get to the coffee auction in Mombasa, to be taken by a few so that they can take to various destinations. That's the Kenyan politics in the constitution or in the laws, that they are actually blocking the pathways and also shutting the minds on options that would help us. So we can not do that intra-business with coffee, with tea, you know. Say for tea now, at least nowadays you're able to find it in various supermarkets, but you don't find coffee that open. Because these are serious businesses to some people who have taken advantage of these farmers for the longest time. So you see, once things are like that, and a crisis like this one has come around, then you can imagine, before we adapt that kind of mindset, it becomes tricky. People from the Western Kenya believe that the sugar should be sold within the Comesa region, and also regionally, the East African bloc market, and also nationally. But now that transporting to the Comesa blocks, unless we are very certain with the road system, again, road network, that will take us to Nigeria, take us to Egypt and South Africa, that's the only time we can have, again, business growing. So the problem which we are going to face economically is as a result of lack of preparedness in terms of a crisis coming up.
All right. Now, Mr. Daniel Odhiambo, it was actually in the newspaper on Wednesday. The Standard actually said that whatever is actually happening in Iran is actually affecting Africa in terms of economically, the importation and the transportation of tea and not about. Now, one would then ask the question, Iran has actually closed the Strait of Hormuz, a route that actually carries at least 20% of its oil. Now, one would then ask the question, is this a dangerous thing that is happening to Africa economically?
Yeah, it is true. Actually, it is true that such a thing is actually very dangerous to the Africans, because when it comes to economically, out in the economic aspect, you realize that this thing is actually very disastrous, such that if at all we cannot be able to see, or we are not able to, let me just say that, to solve the issue, then we are likely to have a problem, because like these particular issues, they are there. That's the most important thing. We are already there. So the most important thing is that the leadership in this particular country should see how best we can actually try to solve this particular issue. Because if it is not solved, then I'm here to tell you that economically we shall not rise, because it is actually affecting all the African countries in general. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Neto Moidi, China and Russia are calling for a ceasefire, while some NATO allies are hesitant to support Washington. Someone would ask them the question: are we shifting? Rather, are we witnessing a geopolitical shift?
I didn't get you right.
China and Russia actually calling for a ceasefire in some, while some NATO allies are actually hesitant to support Washington. Are you witnessing a major geopolitical shift?
Not quite. Not really. Their decision is based on economic connotations, economic factors, and military factors. Because Russia right now is a bit weakened by the Ukraine-Russia war. And telling them now to join in and support Iran, knowing the kind of force that would come from the European Union and or some of the European Union members and the United States, plus Israel, they wouldn't like to engage themselves again in such a fight, because the Ukraine-Russia war is still on. So it means Russia is not really keen on participating in this war. You've actually realized that it's not open in the kind of support they're offering to the Iranians. Okay? Yeah. Because if they do, then the war would shift, because the perennial enemy of the United States of America is actually Russia. The economic enemy, greatest economic enemy to Europe all Europe and the USA is actually China. Because since China transformed its mindset into becoming that production hub for all materials, anything that you may think of, Chinese can produce. And I think this is in the span of around 40 years. But it escalated in 2000 when they had these ties with continents like Africa and Southern America. Remember, there was a corporation called South-South Corporation. That is what really catapulted Chinese influence economically, globally. So China has actually grown exponentially in terms of economically, and so it became a challenge to the British, to the Germans, to all powerful European nations who were doing some sort of manufacturing, because Chinese could actually produce their same material, their same items at a cheaper cost. So they had to cave in. Is not willingly. They were forced, they were coerced by circumstances to work with China. Same thing during times of President Barack Obama and Donald Trump, the first time instance. They were actually trying to clash head on with the Chinese, swearing that they would bring them down. Okay, and it was still the same thing. Barack Obama was haggling with it. Joe Biden the same. Trump the second time has come up with a strategy. Although we don't know the level of the production fuel that the Chinese would be using as an alternative in case oil is now curtailed. Because I told you when they got Maduro to captivity and got Venezuela to captivity, that's actually an oil center, so they depended on that oil. And America cut them short because they were supposed now to set their foot and take up the market, but now using those economic and business commercial principles. But America went by force, military force, intelligence force. They went and did what they did, and now that way they have actually hindered Chinese growth economically. So China would not be so interested in getting into Russia, knowing too well that the man they were dealing with is actually not there. And before they reconstitute themselves and fight the war with one mind, then China comes in, it becomes a little more tricky for them. Secondly, I would like to lead you into some reality that is not in public so much. For almost 16 years, I heard that there's a military force that has been training for the purpose of peacekeeping in the Middle East. That is the Chinese and the military and the Russian army. So that tells you one thing. The military, the war that is going on in the Middle East is quite significant, and it's something that they had actually planned for it futuristically, and now it is coming to the time when they should do it. And scripturally, we know that the time for the Antichrist is so near. So what I was trying to explain is that China cannot now go into it because the fuel channels have now been curtailed. What they would be agitating for right now is a ceasefire, as much as Russia.
All right. Now, Mr. Daniel Odiambo, let's talk about the immediate impact on these particular wars on Kenya. Now, Kenya imports most of its fuel from Gulf. Now, one would then ask the question, can this translate to the high cost of living in the country?
Thank you so much, Martin. I see it is very true that we actually get our oil from the Middle East countries. And therefore, what is important is that if at all we actually have the war, and the war continues for some time, even right away, we realize that there's going to be a lot of problem, because first and foremost, oil is everything. So oil is everything. When it comes to transportation, to the industries, to everywhere. So we realize that once we actually have the problem, the problem is the importation of oil. Generally, the cost of the production cost will be high. Once the production cost will be high. You realize that the cost of producing these particular items will be, once they are high, you realize that these particular items, the commodities and everything, will also, their prices will also escalate.
Yeah.
When it comes into the transport, you'll actually realize that it also affects us very negatively, because they'll actually say that if from here to town is maybe 100 shillings, they'll actually say that now it is 150 because of this particular kind of war. So it is going to affect us very directly, and that is true.
All right. Now, Mr. Mutanawidi, Kenyans tea exports to Iran, nearly 6 billion Kenyan shillings. We actually saw, some articles in regards to these tea exporters saying that, the market, they can't actually export their tea to Iran because of the wars. Now, what do you make of this?
Well, like I said, almost the whole market is now locked, because if you transport tea and expect to get profits, you can't take it to the Middle East or take it to the Southern Asia nations. You can't transport your tea there, which is highly consumed in such countries. Not even Sudan here, that consumes our tea highly. Which is now currently, we know that it's beleaguered with something we call the diplomatic relations to our relationship that is existing with the RSF militant group.
Yeah.
So transporting to a safer market, maybe to the US or to the Southern American, it means you'll have to take a long route via Cape Town, then go towards the deep seas of Atlantic. Secondly, you should know that when the world goes unruly, lawlessness is going to be so imminent, and that means something like piracy in all seas is going to really escalate. So piracy is actually going to actually escalate in the high seas, which means even if you try to do business and the Chinese who are guarding the Djibouti route, the Americans who are guarding the Turkey high seas, it means you will not get to Japan. You will not get through to Europe. And it means now the pirates will now find their boon in the high seas. They will capture all this, and that becomes a problem. Maybe they have warehouses to store them. So the best way to do it is to halt the transportation of these products to this other place. So you can imagine the kind of impact it's going to have on farmers. Secondly, I don't know how much corruption is going to contribute in this whole thing, because it will become a scapegoat. That there's the Iranian war. Remember the Ukraine-Russia war? There was these scandals about sunflower oil and all these things and cereals. That is due to the Iran war. But you see, we are producing, we have rice in Moya. They couldn't buy rice in Moya, they went for rice in Pakistan. So this kind of corruption, a corrupt system that we have, I don't know, it's really going to hit us harder unless there's going to be a change of mind and character of our leadership. So it's going really to hit Kenyans, especially knowing too well that the Far East nations, plus the Middle East nations, they actually consume our tea and coffee. So it's going to hit both ways.
All right. You spoke about corruption, and we then asked the question. 350,000 Kenyans actually, work in the Middle East, and we've actually seen the impact in Dubai or Qatar, and of course we have some Kenyans in those particular countries. Do you foresee a situation where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, led by Musalia Mudavadi, are making efforts to repatriate these people?
Like I said, and it's unfortunate, but it's unfortunate for anyone who has people out there. Someone like me, I have my son locked in those Asian countries. We also have relatives in the Middle East countries. And so I'm speaking from a point of a reality that we feel it, and we can't miss out even on our prayers. So it's affecting us socially, not only economically and politically, but even socially it's actually affecting us. So you realize that the absence of peace in those regions, it is actually affecting Kenyans so much. And in this case, I'm talking about affecting Kenyans negatively. When you know that you have a sister, you have a cousin, you have a son, you have a daughter who cannot you cannot gain any form of access, save for the WhatsApp communications, platform like such, where you are able to see them and hear them. But in a crisis like where my son is, when there is a short crisis, they actually lock the systems, the social media systems. So it becomes tricky in that regard. So it's actually going to hit most of us Kenyans, knowing too well that we have relatives there, because we always say, if there is peace where they are, then we are at peace because of them. If there is peace here we are, then it means they are at peace. Their families at home are safe. Because if you are at war with Sudan or Somalia or any other country, these bombings everywhere, then definitely they will not be at peace. So it's actually affecting us in a big way.
All right. Mr. Daniel Odembo, even as we talk about the Kenyans in the Middle East, we actually saw in an expose in the start of this particular week, we saw rogue organizations actually recruiting Kenyans to go and work as soldiers in those particular countries. And then one will ask the question, are we exposing these ministries actually, who's failing who?
That's a very good question. We in the recent past, we actually realized that there's a lot happening, because I realized that one person was actually asked that I was listening to the radio while I was driving to work. Then somebody is asking that if at all you will be given 1 million shillings per month, will you go? That actually says that even now I can actually go. So there is a problem first, because we realize that the country where we are in, there's a lot of joblessness. People go to school, and then after going to school, we realize that they cannot actually locate jobs very fast. And because of this, they realize that our youths or our graduates or those particular college people, they don't actually have where to go. So because of this, they fall victims to this particular kind of trap. So that's the reason why you realize that most of them, they even feel that they should actually go there just because of they need money, they need to be occupied, they need employment. So that's the reason. So you can actually say that it's also a government which is also not doing its role well, because people are going to school, but at the end of it, you realize that there's no employment. So this actually also causes this and making our people so vulnerable when it actually comes to these situations.
Right now, if you allow me, maybe I can add to what he's saying, and the effect on Kenyans and both locally and abroad is dire. And like I said, lack of preparedness by our ministries, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Labor, and also our embassies. They are never prepared for these kind of circumstances to take place. And sometimes I wonder, you have a few hundreds of people, or a few thousands of people in a certain country. You should be having a communication center where you are able to communicate with these people. Imagine last week, early this week, is when I received contacts of these various embassies. From another source. Somebody just gave it to me and shared with me, and I was able now to share with my son and many others. I was telling them, share with any person from Kenya that is close to you, so that you can be able to reach your embassy, which means sometimes unless you take yourself to the embassy, communication again is somewhat not a free flow. So you see, you're given contacts now, and they've been shared from the government. This is not the kind of thing that should be happening at the time. There should be a constant plan that in case of anything, then this is how we'll be able to reach out to 1,000 people in a certain county or a state, depending where they are. This is how we reach out to them. All we need is just the help of the government, and see how things can work out. But right now, I can say, even with the contacts, I don't know, but we only lay them at the feet of Christ, that He may protect them, because there's no safety in such. But in Jesus, I think we can now rest assured that God is going to take care of them.
And speaking about the expose actually that exposed these rogue facilities actually recruiting people to go and be soldiers in those particular countries. Who is failing who? Is it unemployment, or who's feeling? Is this the government, or should the government actually flag out these particular organizations?
There's a fallacy that has been sold in Kenya for a very, very long time. That if the youth don't get a job, they'll become criminals. So they don't give them alternatives. They don't give them alternatives to exploit their potentials, because they have a lot that is touched in them. There's a lot that is touched in us, but I may disqualify myself with age. But those who have the space and time to exercise anything within, that is locally, are not given those opportunities, because somebody would like you to remain poor and capitalize on you when it comes to election time. So these are the kind of fallacies that are being sold. So the youth are coming out of college. The moment you miss out on 1, 2, 3, 4 opportunities, you take up anything. Our young daughters, and I'm not being misogynistic, they miss out on 1, 2, 3 opportunities. They look for a pillar they can lean on, and that happens to be maybe a sponsor, using the slang that is being used, which is unfortunate, and our young men have decided, since I have to be a man and I have to provide, and options are not provided to me, they're taking up anything. So some of them are saying, well, if it's just a few months, why not go there? But you see, it only takes one bullet and you're gone. So this kind of preparation of the mind is not really happening. There was a time around 2015 and before, university graduates, college graduates were actually committing suicide rampantly, because once they miss out on opportunities, and again they feel like shame is setting in, because they've been taught that whatever course, career you chose, it must be the career that you pursue. So they are not taught that they have the potential to do anything else. A graduate believes he cannot work under somebody who has not even gone to college. So those are the kind of things that used to exist. And what we are saying is that if we don't do that psychological transformation, our youth will still run for the bullets and the bombs. And they will still run because they need some money. Because whatever maybe areas that they would think they would make some chums is not really forthcoming quite fast as it used to be, and especially in these bettings and everything. So it becomes an alternative, unfortunately. Another thing that is sickening is how maybe our sons out there could be hijacked or lured into some safety or some sort, and all of a sudden you find yourself, you're not in college, you're actually in some military base. That's why we are saying it's only God who's going to help. So what you're saying is that yes, that mistake has happened, but it has been created by the Kenyan politics. Kama kijana hana kazi, ile kitu ingine atachukua ni bunduki, kuiba na kuua, unanielewa? Then once you miss out on opportunities, you begin to think like what they had programmed. So I think we also need to change our political strategy and begin to think, with posterity in our mind.
All right, fair enough. And Mr. Daniel Odambo, not once we've heard the head of state actually saying, the number of youths and young people that have, exported to, other countries for employment. Now, we'll then ask the question, should we as a country, create these jobs locally rather than exporting them?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because in the recent past you'll realize that there are so many, because someone was even saying recently that when he went to maybe some West African country, he realized that he found so many Kenyans there, and these were teachers, for instance, because in the country, for example, if I may give that particular example, before maybe this year, there are people who actually even took 10 years before they were employed, especially the P1, those are people teaching the primary school, the teachers. So what happens is that he was actually trying to tell us that why can't we explore opportunities outside? I'm not of that particular idea, because I believe that we actually have all the resources that it takes for us to create jobs within the country. We are not poor. Kenya is not a poor country. The most important thing here is that we are not doing what we especially we're supposed to do, and because of that we realize that there is a lot of wastage. So because of this particular wastage, you realize that there is no room for creating employment. You realize that there are some industries here which of course close down because of one, two, three things. Why are they closing down? So I tend to believe and that it's our country which is actually kind of not doing what is actually supposed to be done, so that actually it creates jobs for these particular young people. We should not be able to export labor during this particular time. I believe we have all it takes for us to create jobs within.
All right. Now, Mr. Newton, let's talk about now the politics in Kenya. When the NFC was actually coming to power, he campaigned on the better bottom economic transformation agenda. And he promised many things. He cited, the border and Mamapago were actually the currency to be traded for the votes come 2022. And one then asked the question, are the manifestos that, the head of state actually promised that particular day, are we seeing, some of the things that he promised being delivered even as we are to 2027?
As part of the campaign team of the then Kenya Kwanza, we had our manifesto with us. Yeah. And like you always hear, the leader of DCP, Rigathi Gachagua, keeps talking about how we were selling NHIF idea to the people, how it would accommodate even the chronic diseases. Yeah. With only an inclusion of around 800 million shillings. But Kenya being Kenya, one would say, why don't we work with 5 billion so that we can have we can have something that would be left for it, because of course through corruption, which is theft, maybe we would lose some, but still have enough to do that project. Instead, they did not only spend now they shifted from the original promise they did to Kenyans. They shifted into introducing a new thing that cost us actually 104 times, because we had actually to cough out 104 billion last year in the 24-25 fiscal year. 25-26 fiscal year, we had to cough out 104 billion to be directed to this new amorphous thing called SHA. But had we invested only 5 billion, save from the 800 million that we had planned, you can imagine what kind of health system we'd be having right now if we had honest people around there. Now, the bottom-up agenda was one of the best agendas, best manifestos sold to Kenyans. Okay, there is a lot that was going with it. When it comes to the help, it was to be increased, and I think the debate that we were supposed to introduce is to have a lowered interest rate and make it standard. It doesn't get affected by the economic fluctuations that will take place, so that it becomes easy to repay. And accessibility of that money was just easy, because it's anyone who wanted it that went for it. Today, the banding method that was introduced nailed it, killed it. It was the last nail on the casket, because it's now working on guesswork. They look at you, look at your record. Your uncle was paying for you school fees in Sunshine Academy, then it means you must be a very rich family, from a very rich family. It's your uncle, not your father. Okay, but now coming to the university, you are actually under your dad, who was being assisted. Now you can imagine how many people are now suffering out of such misappropriation of the funds because of misjudgment. The youth are actually not benefiting. Now those are the ones in school. We were saying, kuweka pesa mfukoni, it is accessibility to financial resources. Yeah. Is it the case today? No. It has changed the tune. It's no longer bottom up, it's Singapore. And Singapore, the other day, the account that was to manage the 5 trillion money was actually blocked. And I think Bata is in court. How do you have a public collection managed privately? And CS Mbadi had to admit that he had lied to Kenyans, and nothing is happening to him. He ought to have been arrested from that dock where he was actually testifying, from the place where he was testifying, that he had lied to Kenyans. He should be now, he should have resigned and taken to court because of such professional negligence. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot that is happening. You know, the worsening diplomatic relations with many countries, even the neighboring countries, which is actually even hampering kind of the pace at which the East Africa community was actually working towards transformation. And when you see things happening like this, then it means there's quite some failure. It was not intended to be that once we enter into government, we take up the government, we were supposed to, you know, dent the image of our country and be the cause of, you know, the breakup of the East Africa community. And such. There's so many things that are going on. So I would say the agenda, the bottom-up agenda, which was meant to benefit people who are of, I would say, the low cadre, they were supposed to benefit from the bottom-up agenda. One final thing, like I said, that there is a lot of innovation and innovative ideas that are actually withheld by people simply because organizations like KIPI, and I'm mentioning them specifically, you present your idea and it takes them 6 months to give you a response. But we have discovered that within the 6 months they're looking for clients. If you attend expos right here at KICC, from the university colleges, universities, colleges, and also individuals, then you realize that there are people who have brilliant ideas that can work from that level, that bottom level, and really empower themselves financially and economically. The only problem is, if you go to these incubators, they steal ideas and go and make money with them. A good example is M-Pesa that everybody knows, but many other ideas have been stolen. People like us, someone like me, I've actually presented some ideas I did some submissions to KIPI, and that's where I got to learn when they told me I'll have to wait for 6 months. That was some 9 years ago, you know. So, and I have others. So when this thing happens like this, I got to realize that there are business magnates who have lots of money, they don't have ideas, and the people who work in such organizations and such incubations are the ones who actually sell the ideas to them. So sad that that intellectual property right is so compromised. So if it's compromised like that, and there is no financial accessibility, how is the bottom-up agenda going to become a reality?
All right.
I'm not asking you the question, I'm just posing a question in the air, even for our viewers to think about it.
Fair enough. Now, Mr. Daniel Lebembo, a pledge was made about inclusivity, integrity, and accountability. And looking at the state of governance in the country, are you moving closer or further to their ideals?
Thank you so much for that question, Martin. I think those are very core values which are very much important for any country or for any individual. The most important thing is that, to me, I think they are just there in paper. But I don't think whether we are really moving closer to that, because when you talk about accountability, let's see actually where we were like during the previous regimes and where we are. There are so many things that are actually happening at the same time now, because when it comes to accountability, we actually realize that there are so many things that have actually happened, which of course we cannot be able to account for. And then when it comes to all these particular issues, it actually indicates, just to add my voice to what my colleague has actually just indicated, is that you realize that there are so many things happening, because when he talked about the Education Funding Board, I'm one of the victims. I know I will follow this very keenly, because you realize that if you there are students there who cannot be able to pay money or to pay fee at the same time now, because of what? Because of this particular non-accountability issue, because you are told that you are abandoned in band 5, for instance. When you abandon band 5, you know, you don't actually, you get very little if any. And sometimes you realize that they just, so long as you have capacity, And there are people outside there which, of course, they cannot be able to account for. And this actually has actually caused a lot of disaster to the students in the public university and the colleges right away there. So you realize that in terms of accountability, we are not doing well. In terms of integrity, we are not doing well as a country. The most important thing is that we really need, our people really need to see what they actually are supposed to do for us to maybe do much better. But sitting where I sit, I don't think we are doing much better. We really need to pull our socks.
All right,
I'm very candid on that.
All right, Mr. Mutowaredi, Mr. Daniel Obama actually spoke about we actually need to do more. Now, one will then ask the question, is this administration being judged too harshly, or has it failed to deliver?
The administration has failed to deliver. And some of what beleaguers its delivery plan is what they inherited in terms of ideology. There's an ideology that was created by the former regime. During the Kibaki regime, we had oil that was being explored in parts of northern Kenya, and especially Turkana and Lamu. And we discovered there's oil in Lamu and there's oil in Turkana. In those Ngamia 1, 2, 3. Right now we are at Ngamia 5. Cut long story short, the government, with this kind of crisis, already the former president Uhuru Kenyatta declared that after visiting Buckingham, he came back and told us that our oil is not acceptable in the market, and so we're not making any revenues. Yet prior to that trip, he had a meeting with the people of Turkana. Remember, they had blocked some trailers from transporting oil to Lamu. Remember that time? Yeah. The president promised them 15%, said it's going to be available, and declared that we are actually digging up 200,000 liters, 200,000 barrels every day. We have that capacity. And as a matter of fact, that will now translate to 2 billion shillings daily. When he went to Buckingham, came back, declared, we're actually losing 2 billion shillings daily. And how do you lose 2 billion shillings daily, yet you're the same person who signs 10 million shillings check for a certain ministry or certain department in the government? You're the one who's signing it. Then you tell me you're not moved by 2 billion shillings. I think angekuwa amegeuza Kenya hivi. Now the people who came and took over from Kenya Kwanza, they took it up, that same charade, and ran away with it. Tumeambiwa kuna mafuta. We are at Ngamia 5. You understand? Energy is the most expensive, but you can see there's also some tribal alignments in all departments of energy, KIPRA, KPLC, ministry itself. I mean, it's all from one community, all the way to state house. So they speak one language on energy. Now tell me, at what point will you have wind power, which after a research by the United Nations Environment Program under Achim Steiner, who was then the Secretary General, they discovered a research presented to him that Turkana alone, the wind in Turkana, can actually supply or provide 5,000 megawatts. Consumption of Kenya then was only 3,500 megawatts. So you can imagine there's a surplus of 1,500 megawatts. That tells you one thing. If this power is also entrenched into the grid, the power grid, then we would be at a very better place to work 24/7, because fuel and lighting is available. So security plus whatever fuel we need, that is Turkana alone. Imagine how many other areas are windy, all the way from Isiolo to the border with Ethiopia. It's wind and sunshine, solar power. But it will not be entrenched into the power grid because there's somebody who is being paid through what they call, I don't know, whatever, is actually paid for generating power, you know. Yet, during Kibaki time, in his Vision 2030, water was to remain a preserve for drinking, and cleaning us, and also for livestock. That's all, agriculture, okay? But now, that's not the case. It's used for fuel, for manufacturing hydroelectric. We should not get hydroelectric there when you have solar. We have wind power in plenty. We have geothermal. the crust of this earth, the deepest part is actually the Rift Valley from Saudi Arabia all the way to Mozambique. We have said it over and over. It is actually the deepest is actually in our Kenya's Rift Valley. That's why you have this experience at Kinungi. The vehicle is actually faster going up thrust. When it's going up and going down, it's slower because of this molten magma circulation. So it creates an we call it electromagnetic field.
Yes.
So it creates an electromagnetic field. So the metal that is traveling on this tarmac and the one that is created here is actually driven by the circulation. So what I'm trying to say is, all these things, they cannot help any person in that bottom-up strategy that was to be applied. Look at the conservancies. These are ranches owned by people who never bought them. They stole from Africans. And because of the collaboration that was there between certain leaders led by our first president, they agreed, you keep the ranches, the land that you have stolen, we shall buy it back. How do you buy back what has been stolen? You go to a place like Laikipia, go to places like Bomet, you find very poor people. But there is somebody who owns a ranch, 50,000 acres, pretends to be taking care of some wild animals there, and uses the same wild animals to maul the local natives there because they don't put up the fences. And the Kenya Wildlife has nothing to say, which means the government has nothing to say. So how will we grow our economy when we have thousands and thousands and upon hundreds of thousands of acres laying bare? The only activity that goes on is shooting and poaching, because you have no right to go visit a personal property anyhow. Get the point? So you've given that person a tract of land. Nairobi is only 4,000 acres. Hectares of acres, actually acres. 4,000 acres. And somebody, an individual, owns with one vote, if he participates, he or she ever participates in the Kenyan politics for any change, has got one vote, owning 50,000. How many 4 acres do you, 4,000 acres do you see in this one? You know? When will we grow? If the government itself does not care about its people, they will not tell these people off. Because leadership in government, they want to end up with these ranches. So the Delamere going. Yeah, it went to a family.
Right.
This lady, this actor lady, what do you call her? Not Coleman. This lady, I remember her name. When the Laikipia people were being, kicked out of their homelands. These are the kind of things that were happening. And the security forces were just hovering around where they were all in a place of safety, instead of attacking the guys who they were being shown where they are actually, emitting some smoke while cooking, where they had their habitation in those caves. And that was not an issue, which means the target was not really the Kenyan, it was the land. Right. Let this lady be left bare and without security, then she can vacate and we take it up. Delamere has gone, now that one would have gone, and many others. So what you're trying to say is that the bottom-up agenda is a flop, because like we always say, if there is a problem with the lead cow, then every other cow will not get to where we have the better pastures.
Fair
so
enough. Yeah.
We have a problem, and it's from State House down.
Fair enough. Now, Mr. Daniel Odhiambo, let's take a look at the things that have been happening. We've seen police excesses since 2024. We've seen during the anti-government protest, many people were actually killed, and that was as well witnessed in 2025. Now, some few weeks ago, we've actually seen opposition leaders coming under attack by what one may term, as rogue police, because during the ACK Retima Church, that is in Othaya, Nyeri County, we actually saw tear gas canisters and live ammunition cartridges. And one would then ask the question, if this is actually politically motivated, and what does that actually say, even as we head to 2027?
Thank you so much. It is true, and many of the youth actually have I've had issues when it comes to this particular kind of political issues. The most important thing is that our youths are normally being used so much. And in this country, there is this particular tendency that if you are not pro-government, then anything else or any gathering which you have will always be interfered with in one way or another. So that's actually that has always been there, and this is very bad, or in a bad taste, especially as we are moving to 2027, because we really need to the police are there to take charge of each and every person. They are supposed to protect us. That's the reason why they are there. So when actually there is a gathering, and the gathering is well known, and the gathering is also licensed, you get that? And then in the church, the tear gas canisters are being in all the time, and there were kids there. Actually, I watched that, then I was like, is this really true? Is this really the Kenya I am living in? It is not very right. So the most important thing which I am seeing is that we really need to see how we can contain all this, because if we don't contain it, I'm telling you that we are going to have a lot of problems. Because those people who are the opposition, for instance, for now, they feel that they have an agenda which the minority there must actually know, and for them to have this particular agenda, for them to maybe sell this particular agenda, they must actually have a political gathering. You have a political gathering, and then it's going to be interfered with by the policemen, you see. So this particular thing, they must see actually how they can turn this down, because if they don't turn it down, then I am afraid that we may lose even more of our young people, because they are the people who are almost outside there in the campaign trails and all this. So we really need to turn out this and maybe see actually how well we can maybe contain it. Right,
Mr. Milton already. We've seen, ODM-led faction, the Linda Mwananchi faction, coming under attack in Kitengela, in Kakamega County. Actually, so in Kitengela, Vincent Oyamo was actually killed. And one would then ask the question, we've seen actually rallies by President William Ruto, no attacks by police officers, no goons. The Linda Ground faction, they actually had their rally in Tonomaka, that is in Mombasa, no goons, no attacks. But the Linda Mwananchi faction and the United Opposition led by the DCP party leader, that is Rigathi Gachagua, we've actually seen attacks and police excesses in those particular events. Now, one would then ask the question, where are we at, even as we 20% in the elections?
Well, I would say the position is precarious because the irresponsibility that has been exuded by the police force is worrying. The silence of what do you call this IBC again is silent, is actually worrying, and the government itself, with all machinery of intelligence and everything, when the responsibility is skewed towards their favorite, which in this case is the government side, then it becomes a problem. He's mentioned about the tear gassing, which was actually the epic of attacks against members of the official opposition. Whenever they have their rallies, they must be disrupted with not only tear gas, but even live ammunitions. They would use bullets that are live, not rubber bullets. And these are the kind of things that we've been witnessing. They've used force until even in an election day, you see armored vehicles hovering around the area. This is just to scare. And you see, armored vehicles to be released, there must be the influence and the agreement of our Security Council, which means before even the Security Council decides this is how we're going to attack other members of this country, other citizens, they can say we'll use the force this much. So release our armored vehicles, and even tanks or maybe, but the armored vehicles were in place. And when you have such kind of things, people who believe that a pistol is lethal, how much more a vehicle with which is bulletproof and has a machine gun, on top, to just to manage elections, in Bere and other areas. So what I'm trying to say is that when you see such shenanigans, it tells you that the country is not headed in the right direction. So we would like the president to take charge. And I believe if there are people who are causing this thing to happen, then let it be so. The president should actually dismiss such people from service. If there are advisors who are not giving you correct advice, kick them out. The other day, there were rumors running around that, let alone the likes of Akina Moses Kuria, who had left, even Akina Farouk Kibet, are not really having their slots assured. Because, you know, whenever you open your mouth, you actually deducting, you know, the confidence Kenyans have in your leader, then that becomes a problem. And that's what I'm saying. The president has some chance to redeem himself. In terms of security, he has a chance to ensure that since he is in charge of all forces, being the commander-in-chief of the Kenya Defense Force, he's supposed to ensure that no excess force, they don't actually abuse the rights of Kenyans for picketing and demonstration, like what our Gen Zs were doing. The campaigns of selling ideas, because promulgating a political party, it means you go to the people so that you can be able to take it to the farthest end. Then, until then, is only that in Kenya, politics are very vibrant. And they become vibrant when the government now begins to, you know, also campaign, politic, and fight, and forget the purpose they were elected for, that is to deliver the service, since they have all resources. But you see, when you say somebody who is powerless, you know, they don't have the kind of gear you have, and you say TKO. How do you fight an opposition and ask them to tell you what they have done? You expect them to use the pocket money and whatever, pesa ya jikoni, to do the roads, deliver the roads, because you have the billions. But what are they doing instead? Nyota, I don't know what, I don't know, youth, whatever money, they just dishing out. I don't know the use of choppers, because nowadays they're building roads to be used by the commoners, and then I think they fly. Because they have the space, because they can't fit. You know, we are so sweaty, so we can't fit in the same area. So I believe that's what is happening, because why would you run away from a road that you built, and you have the best of vehicles with the best shock absorbers? You know, you can't compare to somebody who is riding on a motorcycle or a tuk-tuk using the same road, and you're riding on a V8 Hammer and all these kind of vehicles. It means something is wrong somewhere, and it's not in the roads. Must be here or here.
Fair enough.
So change of attitude again must be there.
All right, gentlemen, I want us to wrap it up there because of the interest of time. And what I want to talk about, including, you know, the 63.9 billion Kenya shillings that actually the IEBC is actually demanding, you know, to conduct the next elections from the 41 billion Kenya shillings. Of course, MPs opposed that. Right? We had a lot to talk about, but because of the interest of time, we shall do that some other time. My name is Martin Macharia. Thank you so much for your feedback here on Facebook. Cynthia Najala says, good morning, watching from Bungoma. How do leaders have the audacity to talk about accountability when State House leads in dishonesty? The headline on Nation today is disturbing and worrying, and that referral hospital, KNH, a machine that treats thousands of Kenyans, has broken down, and yet that is not the priority. How? Right, there is Cynthia Najala. Thank you so much for your feedback. I can see Mish, Brian Malipoa, Esther Kio, Kennedy Judas Rego, Mika Lusweti, KE, Director Dave, say asante sana for your feedback right here on the program. My name is Martin Mashara. I've been watching the Leadership Challenge. I was sitting in for Reverend Felix Kavol. He will be joining us on the next Friday. All right, do have a lovely day. Enjoy the rest of your viewing, and as always, let's do this again when God says we do.